Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, saving a few bucks by assembling my own 2x72 belt grinder. So I get asked a lot of questions by viewers, and by far the most common one is this: how can I get a good grinder cheap? Sadly, the answer is you can't really. However, there are ways for you to get more bang for your buck. So today, we're going to show you one of them. This is how I made this belt grinder from a kit. So this right here is a Brodbeck Ironworks 2x72 inch belt grinder. That means it's a 2-inch wide belt, 72 inches long. Believe you me, it did not come this way. When it got here, it looked like this. Yeah, big old pile of boxes. Now, quick point, this is not a how-to video. What I'm going to do is walk you through the general process of making this particular grinder, and I'm just going to give you my thoughts about that whole process. Plus, a few little tips and tricks that I learned along the way in case you want to do this yourself. Now, if you want to know who I think this kit is for and who it's not, as well as my overall tips for assembly, you'll definitely want to stick around to the end of the video. Now, before I go any further, for those of you who are just contemplating getting a grinder, a super quick tour of the basic elements of a 2x72 grinder. So this right up here is the frame or the chassis. Obviously, this is the motor back here. This right down here is the VFD or the speed control. And then you have various attachments that go into these little shoes right here. You can put contact wheels like this, platens, all kinds of stuff. Now, because of the ability to take all these tools in and out, there's a lot to a grinder like this, and that's why they cost a lot more than your little 1x30 from Harbor Freight. So let's get this out of the way first. This is truly an assembly of a kit. It's not, you know, take a couple pre-assembled components out of a box, slap in a few bolts, and you're ready to go grinding. And so I ended up doing this over the course of, honestly, a couple of weeks. But it was really kind of an hour here, a couple hours there, afternoon here, you know, some time on weekends. It was that sort of thing. And you'll see that I'm wearing about, 10 different shirts in this video, and that's what accounts for that. So I guess the question that I need to address right off the bat is, why assemble a kit yourself? Well, there are two possible reasons, and the most important one, obviously, is saving money. Now, I'm not trying to be vague about pricing, but, you can put it together in a whole bunch of different ways. If you start with just the basic, their basic grinder with the simplest attachment, which I think is just a flat platen, it'll cost you under $2,000. If you get it assembled by them already, powder coated and everything, you basically save about $250 by doing the kit. Now, this is kind of the Cadillac package. It's got a whole bunch of different attachments. I mean, almost every attachment that they make, which is a bunch. If you get the fully assembled version, it's going to be about $500 more. So, there's some savings, but it's not huge. It's not like 50% discount by putting it together yourself. Okay, let's turn to the fun part, assembly. As you can see, a bunch of boxes. I've got one box with most of the heavier and larger metal parts, including the optional stand, the VFD, that's your speed control, and your motor. Each have their own box, plus a couple more boxes with parts of the grinder and various attachments. Let me jump in here and mention that if you've enjoyed all my YouTube videos like this one, and I've been doing them for, 15 years now, where I'm showing, gear, tips, techniques, and saving you money as you pursue the amazing hobby of knife making, well, maybe you ought to think about giving back to the channel. Easy to do. Jump on over to Patreon and help us out. You won't just get that warm, squishy feeling of pitching in, but you'll also get access to many of the many builds that I've done over the years. Knives, tools, all kinds of cool stuff. Patreon.com/Walter Sorrells. So the first thing that I did was to assemble this whole stand right here. Took a couple hours. For assembly, you'll need wrenches, and that's about it. A good socket wrench set will speed things up, as will a drill with socket attachments, hex bolt drivers, whatever you want to call them. Combination wrenches come in handy for doing some of the interior bolts. Nice to have a crescent wrench too. You can look up assembly directions on the bottom of the Brodbeck website as well as on some YouTube videos. Just print out the directions or use them on your phone. Let me tell you the first lesson here. Read the damn directions all the way through, then start assembling. Of course, I did not do this because I wanted my man card punched. Now look, I did use the directions, but basically I went line by line, and sometimes this resulted in my misreading the directions or just not paying attention to the orientation of various components. So in some cases I had to go back and flip things around, add a washer here or there, that kind of thing. Fundamentally though, this is very simple stuff. You don't need to be some kind of metal working genius. You can buy the stand with or without casters. The caster mounting is nicely designed, and you can remove the casters if you decide you just want to stick it somewhere and leave it forever. One key point, don't put the front section on until you mount the grinder itself. You won't be able to get good access to it. So once I got this whole stand assembled, then I turned to the chassis, which is this part right here. So I abrasive blasted all the parts to remove the superficial rust that you're always going to have on fresh steel parts, and then I painted them with standard rattle can paint. You can go nuts on primer and all that if you want. I mean, I even for a second considered Cerakoting them, but I didn't do any of that. Still, just the painting and prep took me probably 3 hours, not including a trip to Home Depot to buy paint. Rattle can paint sometimes can be a little gummy if you don't let it go for a while. Then on to assembling the chassis. It's made from a bunch of pieces of nice heavy steel, laser cut. I was very impressed with how well all the pieces fit together. Never rattling or loose, but never binding either, even with paint leaching into some of the holes. I think I may have had to run a tap through one threaded hole that got gummed up with paint, but that was about it. Otherwise, in some cases I used a mallet to wrap things in place, which I actually kind of liked. That means it's nice and tight, but I never had to file or grind out a hole or a slot, and there are a lot of holes and slots. Another recommendation here, I would recommend taking out all the fasteners and pieces before you get started, laying them out on your workbench, and then assembling everything with all those little parts in view. Each bag of stuff is clearly labeled so you know what you got, and then whenever I used all the parts in a particular bag, I'd stick them back in the bigger bag, so if I needed to go back and reconstruct what I'd used in case parts were missing, I'd be able to figure out what I'd done. As it happens, in the entire kit I was missing one thing. That was a bag of 1/2-inch washers. I was able to assemble the entire kit without them, but ultimately it did mean a trip to Home Depot and some disassembly and reassembly to get all those washers on there. Once the frame was assembled, I bolted on the motor. It's a little tricky doing that, so I turned everything sideways and set a bunch of pieces of wood under the motor as sort of a makeshift jack, and then got the motor on with no problems. Again, it was all just IKEA type stuff, turning bolts. Probably the trickiest thing to assemble is the tensioning and tracking arm. There's a lot of stuff here that can be assembled backwards, so you have to be alert to that. In some cases, I wasn't. It's no big thing, just a little swearing and elbow grease required to redo my screw-ups. The drive wheel does require an Allen wrench to tighten the set screw. This is a very important thing to do correctly, as you don't want the drive wheel flying off while rotating at 1750 RPM. And there it is, starting to look like an actual grinder. Now, this is not made to be just perched on top of a bench, so I'll go ahead and mount it on the stand now. By the way, it's pretty common for guys buying their first grinder to not really think about how they're going to mount it. A purpose-built stand like this is ideal, but you can also buy a stand from someplace like Uline and save a little money.
Or if you got welding chops, just fab one yourself. Next, the electrical work. Now, long ago, I used to be an electrician, so I'm reasonably comfortable with this kind of stuff. None of this wiring's super complicated, and all the instructions are nice and clear, but if you aren't comfortable with stripping wires and that sort of thing, wouldn't hurt to get some help here or have somebody look over your shoulder who's familiar with electrical work to help you out. So first we wire the motor. One really important thing, you really want to make sure you understand how the cable clamps work here, because you do not want abrasives and sparks and dust and all that kind of crap getting into the guts of these electrical parts. It'll kill your motor. Also, make sure the gaskets line up correctly for the same reason. Then it's on to the VFD, or variable frequency device. In layman's terms, the speed control. If you have the optional stand, this is the point where you want to put the front on, which includes the mounting holes. If you don't, you may be at the point where you need to fab a mount for the VFD. Plan on an afternoon for that. Anyway, I didn't have to worry about that, so I just bolt on the VFD unit, then pop off the front and wire it. Same kind of process as wiring the motor. Again, very simple and clear instructions, and again, make sure you do everything you need to do to keep that box sealed so that crud doesn't get in there. At this point, nothing left to do but plug her in and see if she turns. Bam, working like a boss. Okay, so the kit I received has just a blizzard of attachments. I am not going to show assembly of all of them. The basic idea here is just like everything else we've done, just lots of bolting. Here I'm doing the flat platen just to give you a flavor. The way it's made up, you can adjust or even remove the platen so you can use it as a slack belt setup. The whole assembly mounts onto the machine on a 1.5 inch aluminum arm. There's also a work table and a contact wheel and a small wheel attachment, and like I say, I could keep going with the attachments. There are a bunch of them, but let's save that for another video and call it a day here. Okay, so how well does it work? Again, we're going to save that for another video after I've had a chance to really use this thing.
All right, so let me wrap up by talking a little bit about who this grinder is for and who it isn't. I kind of alluded to this at the beginning. Basically, mechanically inclined folks who are just sort of teetering on the edge of being able to afford a high-end pro belt grinder are going to be the ones who would be interested in this. If buying a Harbor Freight 1x30 is stretching your budget, this is going to be too high for you. And if you want to just bust open the package and start cranking out knives tomorrow, again, this is probably not for you. As a result, this is the kind of thing that's going to best appeal to somebody who likes mechanical devices, a person who's not afraid to use wire strippers and that sort of thing. But, again, it's not super complicated. Most of this is pretty much IKEA type stuff. On the other hand, it is a kit. All the parts are here. The directions are clear. You won't need a welder or an angle grinder or a drill press, just wrenches. So here's the thing. This is a well thought out, robustly made pro grinder. It's not some rickety, slapped together budget item. Like I said, it's going to take some time to make it. You may have to run down to Home Depot a couple times. At a minimum, you're going to need some paint. It's going to take some time to assemble. Like I said, for me, this actually took shape over a couple of weeks. Obviously, that's not 2 weeks of work, but, I did it over time. That said, if it weren't for the painting, where I really did want this to cure for a little while, you could do this, all the arms and everything in one really long day. But the painting really slows things down. So personally, I'd count on, like a couple weekends, couple evenings, something like that. That's if you intend to have the stand and a couple of different attachments and so on. And that's fine. That's not a criticism of this machine. It's a pro grinder and it's a reasonably complicated machine, and so it's going to take a reasonable amount of time to put it together. To me, that's just the reality of the situation. Now, putting aside the issue of how much time it takes, the bottom line about this is for a reasonably handy person, and most knife makers are, this is a really doable project. It doesn't take advanced skills or anything like that. If you can turn a wrench and strip a little wire, you can have a grinder at a reasonable price. I should also point out, and I kind of alluded to this earlier too, I enjoyed making this. For me, this was a fun project. So don't discount that aspect of the whole thing. Saving a few $100 may be your main motivation, and that's great. But, I feel like there's always a little extra pride that comes along with saying, I made this. It helps you understand better how everything fits together, how it operates. If you ever have to fix something, you've got an idea sort of from the ground up how the whole thing works. And all of that's valuable in and of itself. All right, as soon as I'm done filming, I'm gonna roll this over there into my grinding room and I'm gonna start making knives. So look for my review of the actual performance of this machine, maybe in a month. So if you haven't already subscribed so you'll get notified when that happens, come on, bro, what are you waiting on?
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.